Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report, a unique look at the business of sports, brought to you by Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano, and I'm here to coach you through the financial game. Today, we've got Yahoo Sports fantasy analyst Scott Pianowski coming on the show to talk fantasy football with the NFL season right around the corner, and Maggie Gray, host of the Maggie and Perloff Show on the Infinity Sports Network, joining us to discuss the latest headlines in sports. Let's huddle up and get right into it. We are kicking off this week with Pomp's Playbook, where I take a look at some of the biggest headlines in sports that you and your portfolio need to know. First, the 3v3 women's basketball league Unrivaled is adding 6 new players to its roster and increasing salaries for its second season in 2026. Unrivaled co-founder Alex Basil confirmed the move to Front Office Sports earlier this week, telling the publication that the league's player roster will increase from 36 to 42 next year. And while it's unclear how much player salaries will go up, Unrivaled players reportedly made an average salary of $220,000 last year. Unrivaled's roster and salary increases are yet another sign of the massive growth in women's basketball, which, of course, has heavily boosted the business of the WNBA. Listen to what Ted Leonsis, owner of the Washington Mystics, had to say about the recent explosion in value of his WNBA franchise with Yahoo Finance executive editor Brian Saucy on our very own Opening Bid Unfiltered podcast.
4 years ago, my team was valued at 0. No team as a comparable had sold for money. This year, my team is valued at $250 million.
Wow.
So we just sold 3 expansion teams to NBA owners for $250 million apiece. So, I mean, it can turn around very, very quickly. Sure. You can look really, really smart if you're patient. But the league needs more investment from ownership. It needs more investment from the WNBA at corporate. The players are very, very talented. And we have to capture this moment in time right now and make sure that we can get to the promised land, if you will, where the league is fully developed and it's built value for all of its constituents.
Next up, the NCAA announced on Monday that it will not be expanding the March Madness men's and women's basketball tournaments for the 2025-26 season. The organization held talks about expanding March Madness from 68 teams to 72 or even potentially 76 teams to accommodate more worthy schools that are often left on the bubble after Selection Sunday. However, the NCAA confirmed that it will continue discussing the expansion for the 2027 tournament and beyond. And to round things out, on last week's show, we covered that the NFL was in talks to acquire a limited stake in ESPN. Well, this past Wednesday, the Walt Disney Company officially announced that it is acquiring NFL Network and other media assets from the NFL, including NFL Red Zone Channel and NFL Fantasy, in exchange for a 10% stake in ESPN. Earlier this week on Yahoo Finance's Morning Brief, Brian Saucy spoke to Disney CFO Hugh Johnston on the value of ESPN's newly acquired media assets from the NFL and what it will do for the network.
We feel terrific about the assets that we'll be getting for the deal. The combination of the NFL Network and all of what that brings. In addition to that, combining our fantasy football business with the NFL's fantasy football business, plus the ability to market Red Zone. Overall, we feel terrific about that. And obviously, there's 3 additional games we'll be getting as well, which are of significant value to us.
And while Disney is doubling down on live sports, fans are gearing up for a different kind of competition, fantasy football. With the NFL season less than a month away, fantasy drafts are heating up. Here to discuss the latest fantasy trends and storylines in the NFL is Yahoo Sports fantasy analyst Scott Pianowski. Scott, thank you so much for joining the show today. I'd love to start selfishly with just a little bit of help around my fantasy team. I am picking 6th in my league this year. What is the optimal strategy when it comes to attacking the first round, but also looping back on the second round? Are we thinking running backs early, wide receivers early? What is your general thought process?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. The first thing you have to do is get comfortable with your settings. Am I starting 2 wide receivers a week? Am I starting 3 wide receivers a week? Most standard leagues will start 2 running backs. If you only have 2 receivers to fill, I would probably look to dominate the running back position early, do something we call robust RB, where 2 of your first 3 picks would probably be running backs. If you did require that 3rd receiver, I'd probably look to go towards something called a hero RB, which is 1 running back you really like, but then maybe pound that wide receiver position early as well and have the envy of the league at wide receiver. So it's very setting dependent. Some people play in super flex leagues where you're going to want multiple quarterbacks. That changes the calculus. But if it's 2 and 2, running backs going to be my focus as meeting running backs and wide receivers. If it's 2 and 3, I'm going to get that one running back I really like, but probably want 3 receivers in the first 4 rounds.
Amazing. That is super helpful. I'm 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex. So sounds like I should potentially focus on running backs to start, but we'll see how it goes. I'd love to just dig in a little bit deeper and go through some of the top fantasy football trends and storylines that you're watching as we head into the season.
Yeah, the running backs have been priced up this year. And one thing we saw in 2024 that was highly unusual is that the injury rate, and I realize Christian McCaffrey managers don't want to hear this because he was the first pick in most leagues last year. He didn't play opening day. He only played 4 games during the season. He didn't even play particularly well. But for the most part, you think of veteran running backs, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley. A lot of guys changed teams, right? Josh Jacobs went to Green Bay. All had monster seasons. And the injury rate at the position was very, very low. This also ties into an NFL trend where defenses have gotten so focused on defending the pass that they're putting out a lighter defensive front. And the offense's adjustment to that has been, okay, we're going to run the ball more. And often with teams, they're running the ball with platoons. It's like, okay, this back gets 60% of the carries. This other back will get 40%. Sometimes it's 70 and 30. In a different era of the NFL, it used to be the bell cow, the one guy, and then you sprinkled somebody in for maybe 3 to 5 carries. Now it's more like your main guy might get 15 to 18 touches. Your backup might get 8 to 10 touches. So what happens, the second running back we start in our rosters isn't maybe as exciting, but we have more playable candidates. And so what's trickled down is the running backs had such a good season last year. The ADPs on running back have risen. This is a league that's been so pass focused for such a long time that it was only natural that the defenses would adjust. We're going to defend the pass. The offenses have adjusted. We're going to give the running back room a comeback of sorts, a renaissance of sorts. So that's had a trickle down effect to fantasy football where there's more running backs going in the top, say 20 to 24 picks than there might have been in the past few seasons.
One of the articles you wrote recently that I read on Yahoo was basically approaching fantasy football drafts from a more simple angle, right? And for the people that are listening to this that are maybe in a fantasy football league at work or with their friends, but aren't going to print out spreadsheets and different things like that, how do you think about a more simplified approach to the draft?
Yeah, one thing I like to look at, so I talked about teams, their backfields getting split up. We see teams, the box score is longer than it used to be, right? So what I want to know is, what teams can move the ball, but they don't give the ball to that many people? I think about the Cincinnati Bengals. Perfect setup. You have a star quarterback in Joe Burrow. You have 2 excellent receivers in Jamar Chase. He'll go number 1 in most leagues. T. Higgins, a dynamite number 2 receiver. Chase Brown, a primary running back who rarely comes off the field. So most of the production goes to those 3 guys. And then you tie it to a Cincinnati defense that isn't very good. They play a lot of shootouts, a lot of 33-30. You think of the Baltimore-Cincinnati games last year, I think both of those were like in the 70 or 80 point total range. That's where all the fantasy goodies are. So Cincinnati is the easy button here where they can score. They don't give the ball to a lot of guys. Now, maybe you don't get the Bengals. You don't fall into the right draft position. I only mentioned 4 targets on their team. I mean, you don't get the number 1 pick. You won't get Jamar Chase probably, who could also fit that frame. Maybe the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, I don't like the defense. Michael Penix was pretty good his last 3 games. Drake London went absolutely ballistic at the end of the season. He had 18 target game to finish up. So Penix likes looking his way. Bijan Robinson, a young running back, 3rd season. He's ascending. Over the past 2/3 of 2024, he was the number 2 overall running back. So the Falcons could fit this frame. Maybe Dallas. Don't like their running backs. Love their quarterback. Look at the receiver room. CeeDee Lamb, superstar. George Pickens, dynamite number 2. Some of it will trickle down to Jake Ferguson, who's a good tight end. These are all offenses that move the ball. They don't throw the ball to that many people. So it's a simplified, tight target tree. And that can be your best friend if you're a fantasy manager.
I love that. Super helpful. I think I've always thought about like the offenses that score the most, but really drilling down one step further and just looking at the people that are only 2 to 3 options on that offense is really helpful. But thank you so much for joining us, Scott. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jeff.
We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we've got the co-host of the Maggie and Perloff show, Maggie Gray, stopping by our show. Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Sports Report. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. we've made it to the one-on-one, a conversation where I get to break down news and sports with a key player in the industry. This week, we're speaking with Maggie Gray, host of the Maggie and Perloff Show on the Infinity Sports Network. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to start with seems to be the topic of the week, which is the NFL ESPN deal that recently got announced. What are your general thoughts on this combination between a sports league and the preeminent player in sports media today in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think we could all see this coming from a couple years ago when ESPN started fundraising basically in some interesting places. We know that they wanted to raise capital. They were not shy about that. And going to the sports leagues, who they already have relationships with, actually seemed like a pretty interesting idea. You add that to the fact that ESPN and the NFL want to bolster each other because the NFL wants to have this outlet that keeps them in the news 24/7, 365. And ESPN is more than happy to take on as much as humanly possible, including the NFL taking a 10% stake in its network. What's interesting about this is from the journalistic standpoint, but to be honest, I think any league partner, you're already compromised a little bit journalistically. I think people might wonder, well, will ESPN cover the NFL in a fair and accurate way if they are indeed partners? But again, so far, you've not heard that ESPN has really, killed any stories, to make the NFL look good. And to be honest, they always are protecting each other just a little bit. So there's really nothing bad has happened yet, but you could raise an eyebrow if you wanted to. An ombudsman, if you will, may raise an eyebrow to say, can you cover this league fairly if this league has a 10% equity in it, in your company?
Yeah, I mean, with financial interests, I think people are always going to wonder what kind of preferential treatment's going on. But time will tell. Obviously, the betting component on the NFL side is an interesting one, too, with ESPN having control of that as well. But another story in the NFL that's gotten a lot of buzz over the last few weeks is Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we're talking about big businesses. The Dallas Cowboys, I think they're valued at $10 or $11 billion today. Obviously, Jerry Jones has been very successful, but it's a unique setup there where he's sort of negotiating these contracts. And now we know negotiating them behind agents, not talking to the agents, with the players directly. What is just your overview of what has happened and sort of how this makes the Cowboys look, but also how does this end?
I think it ends like it's ended with all of these negotiations with Jerry Jones, which is the player makes out like a bandit, and Jerry Jones and the Cowboys look like they wasted all of our time. I don't know if I could speak to Jerry, his ability to make money clearly is valuation you mentioned of the Cowboys and how much he's grown it during his tenure, but it sounds like these business practices are a little bit outdated. Jerry's pretty folksy, of course. He likes to talk about getting deals done with a handshake and looking a man in the eye, man to man. And while that sounds great when you're retelling a story from 30 years ago, I can't imagine any NFL agent would actually expose his client to any type of future risk in that way. This seems outdated. It seems stale. It seems like a waste of all of our time. Micah Parsons asked for a trade, which is unique, actually, amongst the stars. We generally don't see them asking to leave the Cowboys, but so far, it's a trade, sort of in writing only. He's never has still showing up to training camp and to practices. He doesn't seem like somebody who's so upset with the organization he can't stand to be in Jerry's presence. So ultimately, I think this gets done. It will go down probably as a victory for the player. And again, the Joneses, specifically Jerry, is going to look like they were dragging their feet and ultimately paid more for a player they could have had under contract years ago.
Yeah, very fair. I mean, this has happened several times over the last few years with the Cowboys where they just sort of push things along. Other players get paid. It drives up the price for everyone else. But this one sort of feels like Jerry Jones might have done it on purpose. We'll see what happens long term. But switching gears a little bit with college football. College football has obviously changed a lot over the last few years with NIL, sort of the conference realignment and different things like that. What are you watching for this year, and what are you most interested in seeing from college football specifically?
What I'm most specific for on the field is, they're going to reseed the 12-team college football playoff. We have 12 teams for now. We'll see if that changes to 16. We'll know that in December. But I'm most curious to see how the committee decides how they're going to use strength of schedule in determining who makes the 12-team college football playoff, and then how the reseeding maybe helps avoid some of the blowouts that we saw in the early rounds of year one of the 12-team college football playoff and round two as well. Because the SEC, which is, with the Big Ten, the biggest college football conferences in the country, the SEC will claim that their conference, top to bottom, is so much stronger than any other conference in America that they deserve to have more teams into the college football playoff, even if those teams have more losses in the loss column. The Big Ten is obviously saying, well, we're right there with you as one of the behemoth conferences. We don't think so. Add in, the Big 12 and the ACC also want to make sure that, they get proper representation. So I'm curious how the committee, who didn't seem to favor strength of schedule very much last year, how that may change this year. And then for the NIL and the financial component, I would love for someone to tell us behind the scenes how the $20 million that's now been allocated to every athletic department in Power Fives and, in the Power Four and athletic departments in the FBS, how they are splitting those up between all the different sports, and particularly in schools that have big basketball programs. I'm thinking about Bill Belichick, who took over at as the University of North Carolina head football coach. Well, North Carolina is a basketball school. Now they're trying to become more of a football school. And with a 6-time Super Bowl champion Bill Belichick at the helm, you could obviously see their commitment there. I just wonder, how are they fighting for dollars behind the scenes, and what does that look like?
That's a very interesting point. And UNC is a really good example, because I think the expectation was always like, most schools are probably going to pick one, right? If you're a really good football school that drives majority of the revenue, it pays for all the other sports, you're going to commit 80 to 90%, maybe even higher percentage amount of that fund to the football team. UNC is sort of in this weird world where you don't want to be mediocre at both, right? Like, you want to be either a good basketball school or a good football school. So it'll be interesting to see, because Bill Belichick is obviously going to be asking for more resources. I mean, Michael Lombardi, his GM at the school, has been very public about that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they divvy that stuff up. But switching gears again a little bit, my goal for this interview is to cover every sport, and we can't do that without the WNBA. The WNBA has become much more of a talking point over the last couple of years, with Caitlin Clark obviously joining the league 2 years ago. But now they're going through this CBA negotiation where the players are asking for more money because they're seeing attendance go up and viewership go up and franchise valuations go up. The league is saying, hey, there's really not as much money as you guys maybe thought there was. Where do you think this ends up?
Unfortunately, I think this is part of the growing pains that most of the leagues in this country, in fact, all of the leagues in this country, have gone through at one time or another, whether it be a strike, whether it be a holdout. And I hope that the WNBA can avoid this with the players, because they have such incredible momentum right now. This is a league that's been described as a rocket ship. You mentioned all the expansion teams, the valuations of a basketball team, the Connecticut Sun, that was just sold for over $300 million. I mean, we're talking real money for WNBA franchises. So I hope that any kind of labor disputes won't stall any of that progress, because, as we know, working in media, you are fighting for people's attention. It is really hard to get it, and once you do, you want to keep it. Now, live sports rights, I think, will always have, at least, well, I'd like to say always, definitely now, are the most valuable thing that you can have as like media outlets and things like that, because of the betting element and because, the live nature of it. So having a live product that people like will always be in style. But I hope for the WNBA and the NBA, or the players in the union, they can come to an agreement to keep this momentum moving forward, because on the back of all these great players, and then with the rocket fuel of Caitlin Clark and her popularity, you want to just see how big this league can get.
Yeah, and it feels like we're running into sort of the same trouble, albeit on a different scale, with Major League Baseball. I mean, Major League Baseball has already been talking about a potential work stoppage come December 1st, 2026, when that CBA comes up. The biggest disagreement here is a salary cap, right? We know that some leagues, like the NFL, have a hard salary cap. The NBA has a soft salary cap. Major League Baseball doesn't have a salary cap. Obviously, the top players do not want a salary cap. The agents don't want a salary cap, whereas the owners do. What do you think are the pros and cons when you look at that kind of resolution of, like, should MLB get a salary cap, and how do you go about that, negotiating it with the players?
It's going to be a huge test of Major League Baseball's players union, who who famously has been the strongest of all the players unions, because they're the ones that have been able to keep a salary cap out of their sport. It shows the power that they have, and this is going to be a huge test. I mean, the pros are, you get with a salary cap is that you get, in theory, you get parity. You get what you get in the NFL and the NHL, where you see worst to first teams, where you see rebuilds happen really fast, and where heading into a season, you almost feel like any team, in theory, could have a chance. That's the pros of a salary cap. The cons of it, obviously, if you're a player, why would you artificially try to repress anybody's value? You are worth what you're worth. We always have this fun, what if exercise, if LeBron James could just make whatever he could have made at his peak and at his prime, what would that number have looked like? Ditto Michael Jordan. I mean, and so, to artificially repress the salaries, why would you sign up for it? But does it make the league overall healthier? Well, you could look at the NFL and say it might. I mean, look at what we have, where every team and every market seems to matter.
Yeah. Back to the LeBron point, I think he would have got equity in a team, but he's probably doing just fine regardless. Thank you so much for joining us today, Maggie. The clock is winding down here, but we have just enough time for some final buzz. Now, if you weren't selected for the Masters Ticket Lottery for 2026, Augusta National Golf Club has new hospitality options that are available for purchase, but they don't come cheap. According to an official Masters hospitality brochure reviewed by Sports Business Journal, Augusta National is offering a wide array of hospitality packages for 2026 that go up to six figures in cost, including sleeper homes that cost between $20,000 to more than $45,000, and host homes for anywhere between $45,000 and over $100,000 during the week of the Masters, which also include daily cleaning and linen changes. There is also private transportation that includes a weekly driver and an SUV or Sprinter van for up to $15,000. And access to tee times at premium local golf courses during the tournament will run you $4,000 a pop. And if the aforementioned packages aren't enough, Augusta National is also offering a full-scale private home program that costs over $219,000. This week-long package is for 8 guests and includes housing for $98,000, transportation from 2 private drivers to and from the airport and throughout the Masters week for $29,000, pantry stocking in the homes with snacks, beverages, and toiletries for $6,000, a full-time staff member for you and your group at $13,000, catering from a private chef for 6 nights at $23,500, reserved tee times at local area golf courses for $13,500, and a service fee, of course, of $36,600. So if you're ready to have the Masters experience of a lifetime, then be prepared to pay prices unlike any other. We're all out of time, so it's officially game over for this week. Thank you so much to Scott, Maggie, and all of you for joining us.